You're listening to the When Life Hands You Lennon's podcast.
But in an entry-level film production, it's one strike and you're out. You're fired. I'm not calling you back.
If your goal today is to make a basket, we're going to make that basket.
The minute you create something, as soon as it's made tangible, you have a copyright in it.
How do I get our guys to sound that big, that full when they do the harmonies?
And I'm your host, Lennon Seahawk. Let's get to the show. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of When Life Hands You Lennons. This week's episode features the founder of Rephlektor, which is a very highly respectable and profound PR agency and marketing agency in the electronic dance music space. Now, the founder, Justin Kleinfeld, came on and spoke to me and you, I guess, so us. He spoke to us about artist marketing. He talked about the importance of a story. He gave some really, really good examples of what it's like to portray a story and why that's important. We talked about some of the kind of sleazy tactics in blogging and if blogs are even worth it or if they even translate into streams or fans or whatever it is that you're looking to gain. Now, a few weeks ago, I had Lawrence Louie on, who's Justin's business partner. Now, Bampire is a full-service marketing, project management, and artist services and promotion company for music. Now, Justin and Lawrence, through Bampire and in their own careers, have worked on campaigns for artists like Alice in Wonderland, Above and Beyond, Avicii, Armin van Buuren, The Chemical Brothers, Claptone, Flosstradamus, Flume, Flux Pavilion, Groove Armada, No Copyright Sounds, Paul Oakenfold, Pet Shop Boys, Porter Robinson, The Prodigy, and the list goes on and on and on. This is a really insightful conversation with Justin, so I encourage you to listen all the way through because he gives a lot of really, really good information when it comes to putting your artist's marketing package and branding package together. So before we jump in, I want to remind you to sign up to my email list. It helps me notify you when new episodes like this are live. I'd also appreciate a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It helps the show get discovered by new listeners. There is a guest request form in the show notes below as well. So if you or somebody you know would be a good guest for the show, fill that out and I will reach out. And lastly, you can sign up to the email list through the website, which is lennonseahawk.com. I didn't mention that when I mentioned the email list. So you can get to the email list through the website, which is lennonseahawk.com. You can also follow me on Instagram. I'd also appreciate it there. I post some podcast clips and things there as well. So without further ado, let's dive in to this amazing conversation with Justin Kleinfeld. So tell me where you kind of grew up. I know you mentioned you're kind of from New York, kind of started in Queens and all that stuff. So give us kind of that breakdown, how you got into music and kind of what you're doing now.
I was born and bred in Queens. So basically from birth to almost college age, I was living in Queens. Bayside, Whitestone area is really where I kind of grew up. Went to college at Oswego University for 1 year, which is part of the State University of New York college system, university system. And it was just too far away off the beaten path. It was basically on the banks of Lake Ontario, with the most horrendous weather possible. Wow. And I was a TV and film major, so I just thought the prospects of interning at a big company being so far away just didn't really make sense. So I ended up transferring to Hofstra University, which is on Long Island, and ended up having some. They have a really good program with radio, television, and film. So I ended up having some internships, first with MTV. I was in the MTV programming department in 1996, right when like Radiohead's OK Computer came out, Fatboy Slim, You've Come a Long Way, Baby, the Prodigy's Fat of the Land, Jamiroquai's Virtual Insanity. I mean, just a ridiculous year for music, and I was in that programming department. So I saw tons of these meetings and the people coming in and out of the office at some crazy concerts. So that was a phenomenal experience. And then my next internship was USA Sports, and USA Sports was predominantly like the French Open and tennis and golf and stuff like that. But everyone there was really cool, and that ended up getting me into the USA USA Network. It was just one small cog in a bigger company that was USA. So there was the USA Films as well, and through my internship, I ended up getting a job at USA Films, where I became originally I was the assistant to the CFO, and then I moved over to the assistant to the head of marketing, and then eventually I became the assistant to the chairman of the company, who's a fellow by the name of Scott Greenstein. And I must have been like 23 years old when I was Scott's assistant. And Scott, as the chairman of the company, he was answering basically directly to Barry Diller, who's a well-respected media mogul, high-intense situation, kind of fresh out of school, thrust into the corporate world. We worked on some really cool films like Traffic. That was, it's got a huge cult following. So just to kind of be along for that whole ride was really cool. Scott presently is the president of Sirius XM Radio, which fascinatingly we've sort of stayed in touch because he sort of stayed in music and just in entertainment and everything like that, and we've crossed paths a lot. The Sirius has had like a phenomenal dedication to electronic music programming. So we crossed paths a lot since then. So it's crazy that after all these years, we still kind of work together in some respect. But I wanted to get into music, and this time I was at USA Films. This is pre-blogs, there weren't even really websites so much for the magazines. It was just print.
Sure.
We're talking like, people still packing envelopes with promo CDs and everything like that. You're still using the phone for the most part. So, there just wasn't the in like I think there is today, with like, maybe writing for a blog, or, just this wider network of what the dance music industry is today. Like back then, there were no dance music festivals at all, really.
Right.
Clubs, I would go to Twilo, famed New York City club. Sasha Digweed would have a phenomenal residency there. People would fly in from all over the world. And, we would always have, the Paul Van Dykes, Danny Tenaglia's, Carl Cox, you name it, would always come in. Daft Punk would play there. So that's sort of one of the more legendary clubs, in history that I would be attending at a very young age. What ended up happening was I left USA Films because, let me just sidebar. There was a magazine that existed at the time called CMJ, which is the College Music Journal, which the best way to sort of look at it would be like in some respects, would be like the Billboard for non-commercial and college radio. So they would have a new music report, which, would be basically geared towards, college radio, non-commercial radio. And they would run the charts every week, news every week. Every genre of music would have its own dedicated section. And then there was a consumer magazine, the New Music Monthly, which came with a CD with 12 or so tracks of, really, really cool indie music. So, I was always a huge fan of this magazine at the time. And they also sort of had this big event in New York City called the CMJ Music Marathon. And that was sort of like what, sort of the predates South by Southwest, where basically like every club in the city would have a new music showcase for like 4 days in October. So you get just the sickest shows. One in particular, Roseland, it was like 1995 or 1996. It was the Crystal Method, the Sneaker Pimps, Daft Punk, Death in Vegas, Fluke, just like Aphex Twin headlined. He's basically sitting in front of a couch with his legs crossed, just banging out the beats and everything like that. So anyways, this is what happened was I found out that the founder of that magazine is based on Long Island, and he started it, when he was in college. And, I found his email address, and I'm like, you know what, let me email this guy. And I stayed in touch with him for a long time. And I'm like, listen, this is what I do professionally. I work for USA Films. I'm really trying to transition more into music. You got any jobs? And, we stayed in touch. And finally, he ended up having an opening as his assistant. So that got me, I sort of took a risk, a big pay cut. And I at the same time, I also had an offer from Atlantic Records in their new media department, which is, it's like, nobody really calls that new media department anymore. But that also was a higher paying job than CMJ. But, I took a risk. I'm like, you know what? I just feel like this is the path I want to go down at CMJ. It's going to get me closer to where I want to be. Took the job. And then, over time, I went from being the founder's assistant to ultimately becoming the dance music editor. So I had like the only print dance music column in the United States. A weekly column. I interviewed every big wig, anyone you could imagine, and really built up my content, my contact base, and then from there it opened the door to a lot of freelancing work that I would get for a lot of other magazines as well, like Remix Magazine, BPM, Herb, the Miami New Times, just tons of really cool stuff, and just really interviewing a lot of artists that I was just a huge fan of, and just some real, true legends. And then from there, what happened was CMJ was cutting back, and I was basically going to be laid off. So I told a few people, one person, a publicist who I'd been dealing with, because, I was always getting pitched by publicists to write about their music at CMJ, said, listen, I have some part-time PR work if you'd like to come sort of the other side and help me out. And that's kind of how it started for me on the PR side. Is I took some PR work for an indie PR company in New York, and I learned that. And, the things sort of grew from there. And some of the people I had met, some of the managers in the industry just basically says, like, listen, if you start your own company, I'll throw you some clients, and that'll get you kind of, get your feet wet and, get you out on your own. And that's sort of how it started. And for me, with my company Rephlektor in 2005, that's when it was established, and it's still going strong here in 2021. So it's sort of a long winding road from point A to where we are now.
Yeah, that's all. I took a few notes, so you shared a lot of really good information, good grounding of kind of where you're at now. And I can say that, I've worked with a handful of people as a music journalist myself. I've worked with a handful of Rephlektor people, and can say that I've really enjoyed working with them, and the quality of pitches that they send and has been great. So I want to go back just a little bit. Like, I'm curious, like, where is PR like right now? What is the purpose of PR? Like, for an artist who maybe doesn't have a massive budget, can you break it down? Like, what do you recommend as kind of the marketing strategy?
Well, for me, I'm not going to just take on any client. It's not just,
Good.
Let me take a check.
Quality over quantity.
It is, but also there's a sort of like, there's this morality, I suppose, as well.
Yeah. Sure.
Where, you're in this business because of your name, and
Sure.
you don't just want to. So to me, it doesn't matter if someone has never been heard before. Maybe it's a new artist no one has heard of. Sure, it's easier when it's like, if you could get a Daft Punk, or a Skrillex or something like that, you just basically throw out a press release and you're fending off everybody because, so many people are just hungry for those great artists. But, it's really hard when you have to take someone and build them from scratch. For me, what I'm looking for is just a great story. And what I always do is I always have a, sort of, I guess, coming from my writing background, I still kind of do an entry onboarding call with them. Someone will send me music, whether it's the artist, the manager. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I'm just curious, what's the story to go along with this? Because in many respects, it's not just this song is great. Let me, just send it out to people and get coverage for you. I'm trying to build some, really meaningful stories, pair the artist with some really cool writers, with some really cool outlets that is going to build their profile. And it's going to be truly worthwhile for them. For me, I'm not really interested in regurgitating a press release at all. I just don't see a lot of value in that. So I think it's just really trying to tailor make a campaign for someone based on, the fabric of what makes them unique. Do they have some crazy story, something they overcame? Someone in their family is overcame some story. Maybe they used to be a cardiologist and they don't do that anymore. And now they're making dance music, or it could truly be anything. And then, most of the time, artists don't even realize they have an interesting story, because sometimes it's really hard to talk about yourself, or maybe sometimes you don't think you're interesting. So, we'll take that role to sort of have this almost therapeutic session with them. I'm asking off the record information. It's a safe space. And I want them to be upfront and talk to me, so that way we can determine if there's something interesting that we can use as part of a campaign. So that's really the key thing is sort of pairing, good music with a good story, because you just really have to have that good story.
So once you've got the story, what are the next steps? Like, I'm sure it depends greatly on the artist and like what their goals are and mission is, but what are the next steps? What types of things do you typically like? You can point to one or two campaigns that you've maybe worked that you like, that really kind of stand out.
Yeah. One thing in particular, Spencer Brown, is an artist, in Juna Beats, in Juna Deep, phenomenal talent. He's one of these artists too that I can talk to personally. He'll call me, I'll call him. And that's always a really good thing, where it's when, you can talk with the artist, or the artist is at least very, involved in the campaign. Those are always the best situations, because then it's not just, having to have someone to go between who's, oh yes, he's fine with this, he's fine with that, or she's fine with it. Just having someone really active. But Spencer, he wanted to come out publicly. We're trying to figure out what would be, the best way to do that. And there's a lot of, sort of apprehension in some respects, because you just don't know how someone's going to take it. It's such a personal thing, that, you could come out, you could put it all on the line, and you never know how the public is going to take anything that you release. It could be just, is everyone going to be positive? Is there going to be backlash? Especially when it's such a personal thing as an artist coming out publicly. But, we talked about it, and, what ended up happening was we came up with the idea where Spencer would write an essay for Billboard, and he would come out publicly in that manner, where it wasn't an interview where just kind of asking him this and that, but he's just sort of like from the heart, basically putting down his true feelings and what he's gone through in life, and just the driven by the pure honesty of the situation. Sure. And the result was just phenomenal. It just got picked up globally by so many other outlets. It was seen by hundreds of thousands of people just through socials, many hundreds of thousands through social media alone. Fans reached out to him, felt like, he was sort of become a figurehead in some respects. He's just someone they could all, that community could look up to, because a lot of people related to him, and they were in it felt like we're in the same position as him. So, that was one real, everyone wants something to go viral, but that was like, the most organic way possible. I feel like we have hit up some, in the past LGBT media. And, it wasn't until, he wrote that article that they really picked that up, because I think it's, rather than have someone pitching something like that, to have an artist just put it out there is just so much better, and that's what Spencer did. And it's been phenomenal. I mean, it's just unbelievable, because like just the confidence he has now too.
Wow.
You talk to him and everything that he's doing, and you see a change. It's like and I don't want to speak for him, but it's just noticeable. So that was one phenomenal thing that we did, and it's truly impactful, for sure.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I'm sure he just feels a big weight off of his shoulders as well, because he did it in an honest, authentic, artistic way that portrays him even better. So that's amazing. So I like that you mentioned relatability, and that's where people connect. And that's where, I find my favorite music comes from artists that I can connect to in some respect, whether they have a hobby that's similar to mine, a passion that's similar to mine. So can you talk to the aspect of relatability when marketing or just telling your story?
Just could you elaborate a little bit more?
Sure. So like when people cling to things, are attracted to things that are relatable. Like you don't watch TV shows typically because, well, you do. We watch them because you enjoy them, but you can also relate to them in some respects. Like maybe the family function is similar to how you did, or maybe it was something that you envy. So like with Spencer, you said a lot of people were reaching out to him because they can relate to him. So I want to touch on that a little bit, on how you can carve out that relatability for each artist to have something where their fans can relate to them or their story, that makes, their music even more engaging, I guess you could say.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing, is that, I get you say relatability, and I use the phrase human interest is the way that I put it. And the way that I would say is, and I always say is that, okay, so, EDM blogs, yeah, they're going to be interested in this story, but how about those people opening up the newspaper, sitting on their porch, drinking orange juice on a Sunday morning, that are maybe a little bit older or aren't into dance music? We have to find that sort of X factor of relatability that transcends just the music, the dance music in particular, and into something that is a true human interest story, that is going to be appealing to dance music fan, rock and roll fan. My parents, they send me clippings from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Oh, yeah, Ultra Music Festival is coming back. Do you know about this? And they take a screenshot and send it to me. So, the ideal situation is one where, I can, and the Spencer is a good, example from the standpoint of, relatability or human interest, because that is obviously such a big discussion right now, inclusion. So, I try and find stories like that where possible. Not everyone has them. I can give you a lot more examples. Some of them get really dark. Some of them.
Like when you say dark, what do you mean by just sad, or like depressing?
Yeah, they can be sad. Artist, Ben Bomer, another Anjuna artist. His father took his own life, and he never really spoke about it publicly. But we one of the key things around his last album was to just try and find one really good journalist to speak with Ben, to talk about that instance one time, and we did, and we got a feature for him on that to sort of talk about, how that impacted his, his album, his life. It's just not a topic that's really suitable for like a pitch to just the general media. You know what I mean? So it's something that we kind of like, held close, we held close to the chest because, we knew that this is like a really cool, really interesting human, story, but, not something that, is like, we should just be just flouting, I suppose. And another thing, that we worked on was an artist by the name of Marsh. Another difficult story, he's from the UK, but moved to Cincinnati right before COVID hit. His wife's mother passed away around that time. He's kind of this fish out of water UK guy living in Cincinnati. COVID hits. His wife's a nurse, so like all of a sudden, like his wife's like on the front lines as like a first responder for COVID, and Marsh, his first name's Tom, is like in the American Midwest in a pandemic. All his friends are across the pond. And, he wrote this album as like this, this is like his cocoon, his safe space, if you will. So that was a real driving force, that story around that album, because it's just talk about relatable. I mean, the whole world was in a pandemic, but just think about like being in another country, thousands of miles away in a pandemic, and already having a lot of sad, circumstances happen to you.
Sure.
So we ended up getting just some really incredible press for that. I mean, we got him on Cincinnati's like morning TV show.
Oh,
well, like the morning news, which is just not a typical look for an electronic music producer. But again, it was just kind of this fish out of water in a pandemic story. That was a real driver. And that was just something we got through the discussion, talking to Tom. We're like, tell us about the album, and then we just found out like, these are the circumstances for which he wrote the album. I'm like, wow, this is, to me, it was a no-brainer that would be the driving factor on the human interest level for that album, and it was well executed.
Mm. Yeah, I had your business partner Lawrence Louie on the show a couple weeks ago, and we had a good conversation. And I believe he mentioned that Marsh example, that UK guy in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm like, these things are. So I believe he mentioned that. But that's those are good examples. And so I want to go back to your example of finding those kind of X factor people. Like, what are the goals with that? Because like typically the goal is, from what I've seen, is artists want to get followers on Spotify, or they want to go get more streams, or they want to get more TikTok followers, or whatever it is. There's always kind of this goal in mind, or like something that they have in mind that they want to accomplish by doing PR. But like going after some Tom and Jane on their porch on a Sunday, drinking orange juice, reading the newspaper, like what is the type of like conversion, or is there a conversion, or like what's the purpose for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people don't necessarily come to me with, we're looking to gain Spotify followers, or there's a blanket, just we're looking to increase visibility across the board. That's okay. The key thing here. And the goal is generally to take it outside of the dance music lane as much as possible. At this stage, many artists, they have their contacts at most of the dance music blogs. So of course that's, an essential part of PR for a dance music artist. But, they all kind of want to get into, whatever lifestyle outlets, or, traditional newspapers, stuff like that. That's really the key with the majority of the campaigns I'm working with. So there's no real like, hey Justin, I want this so that I can increase Spotify followers or likes or this or that. It's never broken down quite like that to me. But it's always blanket, like let's just try and do what we can to gain as much exposure as we can across the board.
Got it. So when you're saying like and when you're getting exposure, like, are those people typically buying tickets to shows? Like, are you targeting older people? Are you targeting other countries? Like, what's kind of that purpose?
Yeah, now, well, the past year there's been no shows, so that's
Sure.
been out the door. But yeah, in the past, the ideal situation has been, we're working on an album that's tied together with a tour, so that way, we can, build out as much press and exposure we can for the album, but also sell as much we can for the tour as well. So in those situations, obviously we're trying to do as much advanced press as possible with, as many of the cities. So, most U.S. cities have some sort of an alt weekly newspaper. So, in Miami, the Miami New Times, in LA, it's, it's like the LA Weekly, Denver, it's Westward, so on and so forth. We can get into those alt weeklies. Those are always a real, key objective. Because those are read by a wide swath of people. It's not dance music specific. It's,
Sure.
Our artsier people who are, want to go out, they want to see what's going on. And then usually they're also writing about edgier stuff too. So when we can get into those papers, that's certainly a good thing. So that's definitely that's the ideal situation, when we can pair together an album with an album tour. And then on the ground, we would do as much press as we can as well. Radio station visits, where applicable, TV visits, obviously bigger cities like New York and LA, there are bigger opportunities as well for things you could potentially do in specific offices. So it's been a little bit weird the last year without touring, because it's sort of taken away a large chunk of what a PR campaign would be around an album. Not just a tour, but then there's all the setting up and preparing for press, at festivals as well. All of that kind of went out the window the past year. So all that stuff is slowly creeping back. So I guess in the last year during COVID, without touring, getting as many people across the music and the live streams as possible has been a real key objective, because there's no touring. So, what else are you going to do, So, we've had a lot of great music, and I think ultimately from everyone being home the past, over a year, I like to say there's going to be this great, explosion of phenomenal music. Hopefully. At some point, I hope so. We'll see.
Yeah, fingers crossed on that, for sure. I see music is starting to come back in some capacity. I got tickets to Christina Aguilera out at the Hollywood Bowl in July. So there are shows slowly coming back. I think there's obviously going to be the safety precautions in place, but they are beginning to come back. But I think once that gate is lifted of hey, everything's fully open, you can have 100% capacity, no masks, shows are fully on, it's it's going to be very difficult to get in. I think it's going to be even very difficult to get in to see smaller artists, because everybody's just going to be so hungry for music and interaction with other humans and that food and everything, that it's every show is going to be booked out for months. And it's going to be a very different scene, I think, and hope. I think it'll be good for the whole music industry. But from a perspective of a PR guy, an expert in PR, where are blogs at this point? Where are EDM blogs? What do you think? Do they move the needle? How effective are they?
I think, yeah. I mean, I think that they are, like I said, they are a necessary part of the promotional process, because of the fact that a lot of mainstream media just absolutely detests dance music, and I'm talking a lot of the older writers, and a lot of younger writers too. It's just, in some respects, it's just kind of the bastard stepchild of music, dance music, electronic music. It just can be considered. It's, it kind of had its moment of, with the EDM explosion, when, all the big media in the world was showing up at the festivals, and it was just kind of what is EDM? This could be, is this your kid at a festival? And they would just show, almost kind of like in that Woodstock, kind of vibe, right? It's just
Yeah.
it's just kind of like the same thing that's just applied to the 2000s, I suppose. But like, and then what you've seen, throughout the years, you had this big, explosion of, your Wall Street journals and CNNs and all of them showing up at these festivals, and you don't really see them so much anymore at just dance music festivals. You will see them at like your Lollapaloozas and your Coachellas because it's
The bigger ones.
eclectic and stuff like that, and it's a lot of different kind of music, and but just, and then also mainstream media will talk about they're still hungry for interesting stories. So going back to the earlier conversation we had about trying to find artists who have really interesting stories, we still can place those stories, but a lot of mainstream media, the door's closed. Bigger media, the door's closed to a lot of dance artists. So what do you have? You have dance blogs. So it's tricky. It's tricky sometimes with dance music blogs. And some if you look at the blog, you're like, why are they writing about this artist and why are they writing about that? And it's sometimes you scratch your head. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just and some are better than others, but I think it's in a landscape where maybe there aren't as many opportunities for dance music artists, I still think that they can have an important place, and I think you can still do creative things with them and utilize social media and stuff like that. But I think you have to look beyond, like, hey, can you just post this press release for me? If there are interesting things that you can do, you can do it anywhere and drive it through socials, or you can drive it through your own socials, and it could still be a cool bit of content. You just got to strategize, like with anything else. You just can't, be copy paste. That's just horseshit.
Yeah, it is. And I see a lot of publications doing that. And I won't name names, but there's few that have multiple spelling errors, and artist names are formatted incorrectly. And it's almost like nobody's even proofreading the articles.
No, there's no, with many of the sites, there's just no, like you go to a Rolling Stone and there's, certain layers of, editing or discussions of what we're going to write about. And, some of these, it's just, 10 people have a login and, throwing up whatever they feel like doing. And, at the end of the day, it's just obvious. You know what I mean? You can tell when, Exhibit A has, maybe they don't have the numbers, but like, wow, they're doing really good stuff editorially, and, they're spelling correctly and they're picking the right records. And Exhibit B is just, it's like the lunatics running the asylum, So you can tell everyone sees it, and, maybe not everyone talks about it publicly, but, everyone can see it.
Yeah, I agree. There's oftentimes where I'll see an article in my feed, or a friend will share something and I'll click on it and I'm like, what the hell even is this? This is definitely doesn't even sound like anybody wrote it. It sounds like a press release. And well, that's because I look at my email and sure as hell, there's the press release, almost word for word, copied and pasted into this blog post. And I'm thinking, like, what good does that serve for anybody? Like, do you not care about the publication? Do you not really care about the artist? Are you just doing a favor for a friend who just happens to be on the artist team? Or maybe, like, I don't, like, there's certain articles that I would not even point to because it's like, this is so poorly done. And the reputation of this publication is so tainted because they're just known for this or whatever they're known for. I personally have always, like you said, look for that story and want to carve out all those good pieces of information to share so that I can point to as a journalist, and so the artist as well can point to articles. And like, I've done one for Varian. She is a great friend, and has went through this amazing transformation. And we did this like Trent Reznor type electronic guy. So we transformed this entire story that she had into this amazing story, like comparing her to Trent Reznor, and there you go, Nine Inch Nails, and Trent Reznor into this amazing composer type thing, and it was so much fun, and like she can point to that and be like, look at this.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, it's definitely it's frustrating for everybody. It really is. But I don't know what I don't know what you can do. It's the way to fight it. Like I said, is like, you, and no one can take it away from you. Is your own smarts, is your own ability to craft stories, is your own, approach to, if you've been doing this for a long time, there's a reason why, and it wasn't to get people to regurgitate your press release, so you keep going with what you've been doing, and, the strong survive with that. So you got to stay true to yourself. And, great stories are timeless. They will never go away, so that's kind of how I look at it. I could get all like worked up about it.
Yeah.
But, I don't at the end of the day.
No, I don't either. And I think, another good way to fight it is just not feed into it. It's just avoid it and just recognize the other better opportunities that await and better suited for everybody. So when taking on, like, let's say I'm hiring your agency or you as my PR agent, like, how does the pay structure typically work? Like, what does a campaign typically cost? What typically are outside costs in addition to a campaign? Like, what's kind of the general consensus of PR? And I'm sure it varies immensely, but how is it kind of generally structured?
Yeah, well, I can't get into specific numbers, and the reason why I can't is, and this is, even when negotiating or having this conversation with a potential client, I don't have a call with them and just throw out a number. What I would typically do is, if I like the artist and I'm like, oh, we got some really great things you can work on together, I will actually put together a proposal. And at the bottom of that proposal, I will assign the terms that I propose. That way, you're not just pulling a number out of thin air and someone's like, well, what do I get for that? Up above is the plan. Well, not really the plan, because I'm not going to give the full plan without the engagement yet, because then, someone can just take the plan and run with it. And
got
it. The proposal would be sort of, I guess a loose plan or a little bit of a recap of what was discussed on the call, assigning the, basically the types of outlets I would go for. And then at the bottom, and then, including a lot about myself and who I've worked with. And, when you hire me, you're getting a great plan, but you're also sort of in the comfort of these hands who have worked with, a lot of prestigious artists over the years as well. And then at the bottom, I will assign a term, typical, X amount of months for a set number of dollars per month is how it works for a typical campaign. But, I have retainers with our long-term retainers, which, have just gone on in some cases for years, where, you just get X amount of dollars per month and work X amount of projects per month for that client. So it works like that, but it's kind of simple. It's nothing's ever like, for every article you get, we'll pay you $100. So, I don't work like that. You know what I mean? It's just a flat, X amount of months, X amount of dollars kind of thing.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. I think, I've seen PR agencies charge upwards of, $15,000 to $5,000 to, $400. And it's like the gamut of pricing is so daunting to some, because a lot of artists will go to a PR company and then they'll be like, oh, I can afford that. Or they'll go to another one and be like, whoa, that's more than I make in 8 months type thing. But, the value proposition is much different for one or the other.
It's just everybody is different. Every situation is different. I mean, you can have the best album from the coolest artist, and the reality is they just don't have the money. you know, and they could be a big name too, and they just don't have the money for whatever reason. And then you have an artist that, you know, no one's ever heard of before, that, you know, comes from the world of finance, and now they're, gave that up, and you know, they've been working with electronic music producers or whatever it is, and they have a bigger budget, or maybe it just every situation is different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what one person says, no problem, someone will be like, wow, that's out of my budget, and then the person you think you're proposing too much for, you know, oh yeah, no problem at all. It always varies. That's the key thing. And that's screwy too, when you're trying to think about, like, what the hell should I charge this person? You know, like, it's tricky. But I can tell you, I've $15,000. Who's charging $15,000 for a PR campaign?
Oh yeah, I believe it. You guys have been around for many years and do amazing work. So
I'm asking you, who you actually have heard of someone charging $15,000?
Oh, got it. I believe so, but it was like a much bigger agency. It was a while ago. Maybe this is probably, I don't know. It was like a brief kind of in conversation type thing, but it was a while ago. I don't even know if they exist anymore at this point. And maybe it was probably like a multi-month campaign, and I honestly don't know. But yeah, this has been really good. This has been a great conversation, shared a lot of really good information, and I appreciate you jumping on with me and connecting. And I know I've received a few of your pitches before as well. I was looking through my emails. So stay in touch. What's the best way that artists or people can follow up or ask any questions that they may have that you had on the show?
They should email me. You're gonna run like a lower third on the podcast.
I put them in the show notes.
Okay. So yeah, my email, justin@rephlektorinc.com, which, you know, the way I spell my email, what I just said is completely useless because it's not easy at all to spell. But yeah, I mean, that would be the best way for anyone to reach me. I'm pretty good on email. Cool. You know, it's kind of 24-hour a day job.
Yeah.
In some respects.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, thanks again for being on the show. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day. Congrats to your was it your daughter?
Yeah.
On graduating pre-K today. That's amazing. And keep in touch. I look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.